Bom dia, tudo bom? It's a great pleasure to be here. I need to say that this is not my first visit to Bots Brazil by any means. My thanks to Caio Calado for inviting me once again. I was there live in Sao Paulo in 2018, where I had already visited many, many times. I've worked with tech companies there and designers and organizations, and I love the smart and vibrant and heartfelt people of Brazil. In 2018, I spoke about how to make chatbot technology smarter, more humane and ethical. And I drew from my background in human conversation and applying human conversation to the design of technology. It's been my whole career, really. And for me, there's nothing more powerful than human conversation. And that can be true human to human, human to self, because we converse with ourselves, individuals to groups, as I'm privileged to share today, and also between people and machines. Conversation is the opportunity to coordinate our actions, to agree on what we want, and to work together to achieve our dreams. And this for me is very important. My talk today with this title has in it this phrase, bad AI, which I want to explain, and how to move from the digital logic that I believe is all too prevalent, all too everywhere today, and to move toward analog. We are analog creatures, obviously. But let me get your attention today by starting to say, your community, a community of those who understand conversation and wish to bring conversation and machines together, you're the future of what I'm talking about today. This problem that I will describe as bad AI, it's a little funny. I hope you found it amusing. This problem, I believe, needs the ethics and values of communities such as yours, and that we can transform daily life as well as business, and that your expertise is important to this. And let me explain. Let me pull way back and talk about something that is very realistic for all of us everywhere in the world today. Obviously, the pandemic, the biological one, we live with consciously every day. But I believe it's helpful, it may be sad, but it's helpful to think that there are many pandemics: population and climate, food and water, poverty, healthcare, inequality, racism, disinformation, and AI. These, in a way, are pandemics, but what does that mean? Pandemics comes from the Greek word all and people, but people in the sense of associated with a land, with common land. And today the common land is the globe. It's the entire world. And one thing that unites the entire world, or most of it, half of it at least, is the AI that is inside of today's technology. And as you know, this is not news. AI foments many negative things, and its impact on our lives is growing every day. So I want to be careful. I love technology. I've been programming computers since I was very young, as many of you have as well, I think. But I want to talk about these technologies in a particular light, in the light of what they do that's bad, that's not good, and how they dominate our time and our attention and our emotions. And there's very little to rein in, to pull back on the negative aspects of these. And largely, it's the artificial intelligence inside. Obviously, AI is code. Code automates processes. It gives us scale and reach. But it also codifies, puts into code, bakes in values. And these values may not be good. Now, this list, just scan quickly. You know this list. And Many are writing about this and many are concerned about this. My concern, perhaps this is the most important synopsis, is AI makes the world we see and the world we live in more and more, not 100%, but more and more. And I fear for losing our own human purpose. Why do I think this is happening? I think it's because of the digital culture. Now, again, I love digital machines. But there are things that come from digital when they focus on what computers can do easily and what profit can be made. Then the values in the code, I'll speak about what I mean by those values in a moment. Those values are at odds with being human. So let me explain what I mean by digital culture. Digital culture assumes that interaction is mechanistic. What do I mean? I mean that if I'm interacting, that it's well-defined, unambiguous, and even predictable. Information is assumed to be a commodity that can be captured in binary and moved around on a network. And intelligence is assumed that sits inside a person. That's a smart fridge. That's a smart AI. Instead of thinking about the possibilities that emerge in the interaction between a person and a person, or a person and a computer. So I say that it becomes true that given these assumptions of digital culture, that we think, we can generalize and behave human behavior, no problem. It's what machine learning does. We're good. It also means that the same option, this product to you, this product to someone else, this product to me, that those products mean the same thing, that they have the same importance. And lastly, that machine prediction can be so good that it says, listen to this, watch this, buy that. We're done. What are the examples? You know all of the examples. Search engines like PageRank and Google. You can't learn why it's offering you the choice. YouTube shows you something to look at. You can't say, why did you show me that? You can't negotiate. You can't have a conversation. Newsfeed, etc. And we know the disadvantages that these are bringing. So very quickly, Google doesn't tell you its intent. It's not transparent. You can't help control the focus with what YouTube shows you next. You either say yes or no. And you can't control the choice in the way that you would in a human conversation. These are my complaints. This is the codification of values that I believe are negative. And they control the outcomes, those who write the code. Let me do a little story. This is the parable of Luigi's Pizza. Usually I would do this live. In fact, I did this live in Sao Paulo a couple of years ago in 2018. I ask someone to ask me where there's good pizza. And I say, right across the street, the best pizza is Luigi's Pizza. And then I ask them to ask me, why is it great pizza? And they say, Paul, why is Luigi's Pizza the best pizza? And I say, Forse, I'm not going to tell you. Obviously, the audience is shocked. But then I say, I just described Google. Because Google doesn't tell you why it's choosing what it's choosing for you now. Yes, 200 signals. Yes, complicated. I don't care. If a human being treated you the way I just treated you, you would never talk to that human again. And yet, we still talk to our machines. So what's the problem here? The problem is not the technology. It's how we fashion it. It's what we make it into. And because the platform companies, and we often work for them, build these engines that dazzle our brains and addict us to our biological vulnerabilities, we're stuck. But I am here to say this is not the only option. We can shift technology from these digital assumptions back toward our analog roots, our physical, organic, biological selves. And what I want is to bring novelty and choice transparency, and conversation to become the new core principles. So I'm claiming here that there are other ways to write code. We can think more in analog, biological, interactional, and create frameworks along those lines. Let me show you. You remember this? Interaction, instead of being mechanistic, can be in an analog framework, conversational. Hello, you know that. Information can mean triggering ideas. You say something to me. What you said doesn't contain the importance of it. What you said that comes to me and I go, that's what's important. So what information triggers? It's a different model of what information means. And lastly, intelligence. It's a relationship. It's not in the box or in the person. So this parable of Luigi's Pizza lets us look again at these examples and say, why can't the intent be transparent? Why can't you ask Google, why is Luigi's the best pizza? And get an answer and have it say, well, Paul, you need gluten-free. You want a place that's open now and it's across the street from you. And the reviews have been spectacular and they do sustainable sourcing of the food. Okay, now I know that I want to go to Luigi's. I'm not sure if it just tells me result number one. Similarly, can I ask it questions? Specific questions that are my interest? Can I collaborate on where the conversation goes? And can I say and move it in a completely different direction? So can I bring these attributes to interaction? Can I bring conversation and analog to interaction? And then novelty and choice, transparency and conversation would become the new core principles of interaction. Because a conversation is a great thing. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me go back a little bit and say a few things that I said in 2018. At that point, I presented a conversation model from Conversation Theory by Gordon Pask. And what's important about this model, you can look at the details, but what's important is it talks about intent and action. In a conversation, my intention is important, and how I will carry out that intention in action is important, especially if I'm collaborating with you on what do we want to do and how do we want to do it. The summary of this is humans need to have agency. Agency meaning control of intention and control of action if they are to be human. So interactions with a machine should allow the human to have agency. If I get a result and it says, buy this, eat this, watch this, and all I can do is consume it or say no, that's not agency. Now, conversation is so important. What may follow from a conversation is a shared history. You know this with every friend and every family member you have, which builds a relationship, which builds trust, which builds respect, and ultimately unity. We can be together. We can be together through conversation. And if we are together, then we can build community. We can have commerce. We create culture and art. We govern ourselves, hopefully. This is a challenge. And ultimately, we create a society because we have conversation. So this point of view, this idea of bringing conversation is not a little better. I say it's profoundly better. Now, could we make a future rich with novelty and choice by bringing humane, organic, analog interactional frameworks forward and by changing the social fabric in conversation? How do we do that? That's a really ambitious idea. The goal of the project I'm describing, which I'll tell you more detail in a moment, is to design and integrate new classes of interactional systems, analog frameworks, and to both make them and promote them. So to find them in the world where conversation is primary. Let me try to make this a little more tangible in a way. Let's think about how machines work. They're animated by data on the left, and think about how humans work and live, animated socially, right? So data is binary. We're socially animated. We're biological creatures. We have emotions. We're integrated in the world. We have to live. We have to breathe. We have to eat. Data is discrete. Social humans are fluid. And so on. Now, what we have on the left is substantially what digital does for us today, and it's transactional. More and more, I don't have to argue this in this audience, more and more conversation is important. So if we have this digital side and this analog side, how do we bring them together? I believe that there is a way, and that is called cybernetics. Now, that may surprise you, and I will explain this briefly. Cybernetics affords a way to bring these two. It can become bilingual between the digital and the analog and create a synthesis and alternatives. So cybernetics, why is it bilingual, and how does it create interactional frameworks? Very quickly, cybernetics is not robotics. Touches on it, but not entirely. It's not biomechatronics. It's not AI, although AI is related. It's not chips in your brain. It's not freezing dead people. It's the art of steering. Cybernetics comes from a word from the Greek meaning to steer artfully toward a goal, like you're in a ship. Here's a model of the way it works. You sense something in the world, you compare to what you want, and you act. It's the art and science of feedback and goals, of systems with purpose. Now, you may not know that neural nets was the origin of cybernetics and AI. In the 1940s, cyberneticians invent neural nets. But then AI branches off, does symbolic AI, does expert systems. Then we get big data and massive compute, and neural nets come back. And that's why we have today's AI. But I beg your pardon. Cybernetics is very different than AI. And how does it move us forward? Well, it came before. It's about purpose. It's not about zeros and ones and bits and data sources and so on. It offers models of regulation in complex adaptive systems like the world we live in today, like the world of pandemics. It brings an ethical imperative. I don't have time to explain this today, but trust me. It's across all disciplines. It's not limited and siloed within a given discipline. It's not just engineering, just ethics, just computers, just sociology. It's all of those things. And it embraces the unknowable and the unpredictable. And that's the world we live in today. It's unknowable and unpredictable. So this is the framework of thinking about how we bring these two together. I need to make a brief excursion again in what I talked about in 2018. I talked about a conference, an exhibition really, that took place more than 50 years ago now, called Cybernetic Serendipity. And this work was shown. This is a life-size bunch of robots called Colloquy of Mobiles, designed by Gordon Pask, again, the inventor of conversation theory. And he was always asking, what is a conversation? And he created these moving robots. They twist and turn, and they talk to one another with light and sound. And here is an installation in Paris from about a year and a half ago now, of these objects. So each one, the large ones are males, the smaller black ones are, the large ones are females, the smaller black ones are males. They talk to one another with light and sound. They have a kind of crude conversation. Why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because these are analog interactions between machines having a kind of conversation. And this is the work of Gordon Pask, who is the master of analog interaction. This is one example of countless numbers of systems that he built. The Colloquy of Mobiles is about autonomous agents that converse and cooperate. That's what we want to be, right, as humans. We want to have agency when we interact with digital machines. We, as humans, are both organic and social, and we want to interact with machinic digital systems. Colloquy of Mobiles expresses that. Information triggers a response, but doesn't guarantee it. You can say something to me, and I'm not going to automatically respond. I'm a human being. I'm going to give you a different response depending on how I feel and where I am and who you are. And that's the way these mobiles work. And intelligence is in the interaction, not standalone. So, Pask's goals were to understand conversation and to make machines that learn like humans. So that's one example from history of cybernetics being a bilingual connection between digital and analog. But that's old. We need new prototypes. A colleague of mine is proposing an AI system that itself generates a continually changing configuration of ideas. Can humans be talking and an AI system listening and the AI offering new ways of thinking about what's being said? And those ideas could be sources. One example of where we want to be, where we want to go. Now, cybernetics, I want to say one more thing about. It's an epistemology. It's a way of thinking about how we know the world and how we are in the world and how we learn in the world. And cybernetics is emancipatory. It frees us because it opens possibilities and it allows us to participate. Emancipatory and participative epistemology. A mouthful, but that's what we want with our machines. We don't want to be controlled by our machines. And this is my wonderful colleague, Larry Richards. Well, this is a very ambitious idea. We're going to look in the past and find examples. We're going to make new examples in the future. How do we gather the momentum to do this? Well, there's a precedent in cybernetics. In the 40s and 50s, 1940s and 50s, there was a set of conferences funded by a nonprofit called the Macy Foundation, and these are called the Macy meetings. And we know cybernetics to the degree that we do today, in part because of these conferences. And I'm proposing something outrageous, audacious. I want to have new Macy meetings. Now I'm going to go very quickly in the minutes I have, and these slides are available online. I'll give you the link when we're done. The original Macy meetings was in a particular context of post-World War II, and digital was just coming up. And it was the recognition that systems are causal and have feedback in them. But the Macy meetings themselves were fairly closed. Participants were carefully selected, and it was transdisciplinary. In the new Macy meetings, as I conceive them, post-COVID wicked problems, that's a serious issue. Digital is supreme, but we're now recognizing that we need this social technical entanglement to be part of our conversation. I want an open network of collaborators, and I want to be transdisciplinary, of course, across disciplines. Transglobal, every continent, every ethnic group, every representation of humanity, and transgenerational, meaning across the generations, all ages, obviously critical. How are we going to do this? We have a plan. I don't expect you to read and understand this plan in 5 seconds, which is all I have. But the idea is find these examples, see where AI now is influential and prevalent, that's B, and then C, offer alternatives. Here's a recommendation from AI. Here's a recommendation from an analog framework. Here's a suggestion to listen to a piece of music. Here's how we're going to do it in an analog framework. Code them, disseminate them, share them. And we've been very active. Again, this will be in the slide deck that I'll give you a link to. Very active over the last year. Plus, we have plans going forward. We have a wonderful advisory council, including Guilherme Kujawski from your own city. You may know him as a sci-fi writer and journalist and media critic, wonderful colleague. In brief, today I've argued that digital culture contributes to the pandemic of AI. Human experiences are different than the digital culture. We need analog frameworks to be organic, conversational, and humane. Cybernetics is a bridge. It's a bilingual sensibility. We can get new patterns, new working prototypes, and by pushing them out urgently in the context of New Macy meetings and New Macy conversations in the 21st century, we can bring a rich mesh of collaboration. We'll be deliberate about what we want to conserve as analog biological social beings, and then use technologies to serve those principles. We are very excited to see what can emerge. Please join us. There is a meeting coming up on October 16th. Please write to me. This is my closing slide, and I'm finished. Here is the link at the bottom, pangaro.com, bots 2021. I would love to hear from you.